All right, friends, we are glad you're here for week 2 of our discussion. We're talking about the gut triad today. So the gut triad is the 8s, 9s, and 1s. So the 8 is called the challenger or the leader. The 9 is the peacemaker, and the 10 is the perfectionist or reformer. And so since we've got a smaller group here today, I wanted to start maybe with an interview because I am not any of those things, but we do
What
have
are you? What are you?
What am I? I am a 3.
Okay.
And as is Chelsea.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Nice.
We like all the attention, but today we'll turn the attention to you, Harper.
We're achievers.
That's right. Achievers, performers.
That's right.
So, but I'm married to a 1. And Chelsea, did you say you're married to a 1 also?
I think so. I'm not really sure yet.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, and it's very interesting. I found in marriage, like you can think what they are, but they really have to decide for themselves. So one thing that Suzanne Stabile always says is that if you figure out what you are and you have the road back to you, to say, would you please read this chapter just to understand me more? Because it's helpful for them. Like it gives them a different perspective. But she's like, very few people that you ask to read the chapter about you are not going to want to figure out what they are too. So, but they have to do it themselves. Like we can
have to be the one to declare it.
That we can figure out kind of what stance they're in, but so we can have compassion and try to respond to them based on their stance, but not like we can't decide. And so that's hard because we see their actions and so we can think, but once we know, then it all makes sense.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, and like I have been like on this Enneagram journey for a little while, but then my husband and I just I re-listened to it and he listened to it for the first time this weekend when we were in the car. And it was so great. It was so great to have those discussions and for him to say what he is. And I had my suspicions, but it was, like I said, it's great that he could say that. And he said it was so freeing because he felt like, now I know I'm more normal than I thought.
That's how I felt too. That's totally how I felt.
Oh, so yeah. So tell us.
I think for a 1, which I am, that is particularly critical.
Okay. Tell us why that is.
Okay, so, well, you first asked how I discovered what I was. And I think this is really important because every test I've ever taken told me I was a different number.
Interesting.
And so for people who maybe feel like this Enneagram thing doesn't really resonate with me, like, yeah, I don't know. It's probably because you took a test and your actions, maybe how you thought you were supposed to answer, things like that gave you an answer. But that's why really the road back to you is so crucial, because if you really read it and really dig in to find out which one you are, then you can find out what you are. So if you're just following along, that's huge, because so I always thought I was this other number. I was like, no. Someone even questioned me, like, do you think you might be like a 1 or a 3? I'm like, no, I don't think so, because I always test this and this is why it makes sense. But there were things about it that didn't. And I really struggled with that. And it was more the motivations and the actions that didn't make sense. And so when I read the book, I was like, oh, this totally makes sense. I also have talked to people who maybe there's a number that they want to be. So they answer like based on what they want to be, or they really are like, I want to be this. So yeah, this fits. But when you really just dig in, I actually, if you've listened to any of That Sounds Fun, Annie F. Downs' podcast on the Enneagram that she's just doing for the summer, it's not always about the Enneagram. It's just like 9 weeks on the Enneagram. And in that podcast, she really just digs in, but she talks about how like sometimes like the number that you're like about, that's the one you are. And she says except for 7s, because 7s get excited that they're a 7, but everyone else like, oh yeah, I guess that is me. But for me, like when I started, I always thought I could not be a 1. Like I'm not a 1. Like, I'm not a 1 because I'm not a perfectionist in like the typical terms. Like Like, I can't tell you how many times Ryan's like, you had a typo in your Facebook post. Like, you want to fix that. Like, or things like that. Like little things where I'm not that kind of perfectionist, but I am a perfectionist in other things. And it's so funny because one of my friends who's like a really, like, has studied the Enneagram for quite a long time. She actually, have you heard of Sleeping at Last? And now they have a song for each number.
Yes, I have.
So that's her brother-in-law.
Oh, funny.
So Marissa O'Neill, who's on my team, her brother-in-law is Ryan O'Neill from Sleeping at Last. Her husband actually used to be the drummer for the band. But so she's been studying Enneagram for a long time, and I've kind of looked at it, and she was like, oh my goodness, you are like the stereotypical one. Like, you are, even those little things. But if you can hear something like, well, that can't be me because of that. But we're all like different shades of blue, when it comes to a number. And so when I realized that was me, it really did make a huge impact because it started to help me understand why I was responding to certain things and why.
Oh my God, shut up.
Maybe somebody mute.
Sorry, no, I've got notifications blowing up on my phone or on my computer, and I don't know why. Sorry, not talking to y'all.
You know how to mute on your phone.
Yeah. I'm still figuring this out. Sorry. I guess there's mute. Okay, there it is. Sorry.
There you go.
So not talking to y'all.
But I think it's made, I know you also asked like how it's made a difference in my relationships. It's made a huge difference in my relationships for a couple of reasons. One, because like I understand why certain things make me so upset, and it helps to deal with them. Like the self-awareness piece. So Suzanne Sabile always says that like the two things that you get from the Enneagram are self-awareness and compassion. And I think that's so true. So the self-awareness piece has been huge because like I understand like why I'm doing something or why something is bothering me, or even like you said about, and I think like for ones, you have like the critic in your head all the time. And I think that's why like for ones, like, oh, like this is okay. Like this is normal. Like, okay, like this isn't just me. Like, it's not just, I think that's one of the reasons that it's particularly helpful to like resonate with that. But even like, I get so angry, when my kids don't just like do the things they're supposed to do at bedtime, because it's like not efficient. Like just be efficient and we'll have a better snuggle time afterwards. Like we'll have more time to snuggle afterwards if you just do the things you're supposed to do. Like just be efficient. But it's also been really good to understand the Enneagram because I'm able to express myself better. It like gives you an opportunity to put words around, at least for me. Like there was this situation with my husband and I, and like where he was confused about why I was acting a certain way and why I was doing things a certain way. And like I had read something in the road back to you, and I shared the anecdote from the story, and I'm like, and it made sense because it gave me terms to put in. Like I was like doing all the things to get this thing done and like very focused and like this and this and this and like getting everything in order and like not showing any attention or affection. But in my mind, I was loving them by like making sure everything was in order. And like, there was like an example of that in the book. And I'm like, this is what was happening. Like, and so, but it also makes me aware that I'm doing that, but it also gives me terms in which to share. So.
Nice. Well, it's funny. My husband is home for work and he's been in and out, and he's a one, so he's resonating with a lot of what you're saying about the lack of efficiency, because he is one that we will be standing in a line at a wedding. And like everybody's in line. In fact, we were at a wedding last week. They were serving ice cream cake, and he was like, "This line is not efficient." He went back there and started dishing out the ice cream cake for people, because it was not efficient and he had to fix it. And he could, and it was helpful at the wedding, and so it was fine. But it's just funny that inefficiency bothers. So do you have anything else to add?
No, I just totally agree with that. Yeah.
All right.
That's my husband too, all about efficiency. The thing that drives us crazy is going to meetings and nobody knows what's going on. And we're just like, don't you have a plan? Like, this is such a waste of time, right?
It's
Yeah.
very difficult for me to not jump in when there's a problem or inefficiency. And if it's not a situation where I should jump in, then I just comment to Alyssa about how this could be.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because if you listen to the 2, which is the helper, they're jumping in for very different reasons than we are. And so it's just very interesting to observe all of that and the differences in why different people like and their motivations behind it. But that goes back to like understanding the motivation piece, because if we just test on actions, which is what we normally test on, then we can not get the correct number of what we are, and then the whole process really it's inefficient.
Yeah.
True story.
No, we just did this little trip this weekend. I don't know if Alyssa mentioned it or not, but we listened to the chapter on this. It was super helpful for me because I really have not. I've done some different personality tests and things like that, but I have never studied this one in particular. It's just like the lights were going on, and yet at the same time, I also commented that it was encouraging, even though it reveals these things that are not so attractive about you. I also was encouraged because I felt like, I was more driven by sort of the negative side of this 10 or 15 years ago in my life than I am now, because of the opportunities to grow and mature and understand God's grace and just those kind of the maturing through it. And I appreciate that about the book, that it talks about, here's what sort of the immature version of this looks like. Here's what the average version, and then here's what the more mature is at its best. And that was encouraging to me, that it's not all bad, but it's informative to help shed light on it. And like you were just saying, that self-awareness.
Well, fun. All right. Well, I have a question for Harper. So a lot of this you just covered, but here's a little side thing, because I heard you talking about your anger with your kids when things are not efficient. And I know that is the deadly sin. The one is the anger. Like, is that true for you? Was that a surprising thing for you to find out? Or were you like, oh yeah?
No, that made sense.
Yeah, it did.
That totally made sense to me. Like, and yeah. So, I mean yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting too is what Eric's talking about, like you can be like, and that, like, they say that you were the closest version, like the best way to think about it, like what you did, like who you were in your 20s, like your early 20s is like the best way, like when you're 20 is like the best time to figure out what number you are, and like thinking about that, but also like really thinking about like that we go from the high side to the low side, average, above average, below average. We're always moving, and like we're never like always on the high side or always mature enough, but we're always going back and forth, and it's just to try to be on that higher side.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, what would you like the world to know about ones and understand about ones?
Well, I think, like, honestly, like, and I have a couple things, but I so recommend that everybody listen to the Enneagram Summer by Annie F. that Annie F. Downs did on her podcast, because it goes through like an hour of a man and a woman 1, and then a man and a woman 2, and it's then Beth McCord, who is an Enneagram master, who is very based on like your spiritual needs. She does an intro to it, but you get to listen to these two people talk for an hour and dialogue about different things. And I think that that's the most helpful. But I think that like just understanding like that you have this, I think that you have this inner critic all the time. And so it's very easy to, unfortunately, like when you're in a low place, to take things personally, to get offended, because you already have a critic in there, but you also have to like also take what they say with a grain of salt, because they have a critic all the time. And so it's easy. Like it's work to, like, when my kid falls down and hurts their leg, but it was because they were doing something disobedient. It is like, I have to be like, are you okay? Like, it's like work to ask if they're okay before I say, you understand that if you had done the thing you were supposed to do, this wouldn't have happened. Like, that is how my brain works. And so, like, even having compassion in that way, and just, I mean, there's lots of different things, but like I said, that call covers it. But that compassion for that inner critic piece.
And I think everybody has the inner critic, but I hear that more, that it is a big piece of the one. So I will keep that in mind, especially as I relate to that guy that I'm married to here.
Well, I had a question about that.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay, so my top 3 in the test said I am 9, 6, and 4. But reading about the perfectionist, I find myself thinking, that sounds a lot like me. And especially with the kids thing, because the first thing I say is, if you hadn't been doing this, you wouldn't have done that. And so I'm like, how much of all the other, I guess, categories bleeds over into something? Because I feel like I'm a 6, but I haven't read the chapter about that yet to really specify. I feel like I'm more of a 6 than the 9 or the 4, but then I read perfectionist and I'm like, oh, yikes, that's a whole lot of me too.
The 6 can easily be confused with the 1. It's actually a really common one. And so a lot of people in different aspects want to be a 1, but if you read about the 6 and read about the 6 and read about the 6 and listen to that Annie F. Downs podcast about the 6. But, they talk about how the 6 has like a parliament or a committee. So which is different than the inner critic, but that piece, but also, and then a 6 goes to 3 in stress. And so sometimes that 6 going to 3 in stress, you can be like, but I'm like a 1, because the thing is that you hear me talk about behaviors and actions, and you resonate with the behaviors and actions, but it's all about the motivation to understand your number, because your number is always your number and your core number is your number. And so it's about your motivations and like the lens you see the world through. It can play out in different behaviors. Alyssa and I are going to have a lot of similar ways that we run our businesses and do things, but it's where those things are coming from that helps us to, one, be self-aware, and for us to for me to have compassion for Alyssa and her to have compassion for me in different ways. And so it's easy to be like, oh, but I do that, but it has to go back to the motivation. So just read that first page, those like number 10 things about the 6. And
Well, I'm listening to the audiobook, so that makes it harder, but yeah.
Well, Alyssa, do you have a copy?
Nope, it's all audio for me too, but.
Okay.
And I'm in Texas.
I'll take a picture of it.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, post it on the page. That'd be great.
Yeah, because I, in stress, resort to 9 typically. So yeah, I'm having a hard time pinpointing myself right now, but I haven't read them all. Yes.
It'll probably become more clear.
6 goes to 9 in security.
What was that? Sorry.
6 goes to 9 in security.
Meaning, okay, what does that mean?
When you're in a good place, you would take on the traits of the 9, the positive traits of the 9.
Oh.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the more you read about them, the more you learn about them. And like I said, I think listening to this podcast of the 2 numbers like talk, and you're like, yeah. Or you're like, that's why so-and-so responds this way. That's why so-and-so responds this way. Like, and you just develop this compassion in a different way.
Well,
if
and
you post the link to that podcast in the group, that would be great.
Okay, I'll post it in that group. But I think that's why Suzanne Sabile always talks about that this is a journey. It's a journey. You have to take your own journey. And it's like, that's why her podcast is called My Enneagram Journey, because it is a process of like understanding, learning, and figuring that out, and how these things play into each other and how it relates in different relationships and things like that. So
And we as people are on a journey anyway, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, which is why we're here. So
Well,
thanks
I
for
gotta
being
zip
here.
off, but thank you
Yes.
for being on. And
You bet.
I will post that link in the report or in the group.
That'd be
Yes.
great.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks, Harper. Thanks for being here. I just want to touch base with Allison real quick in case, Allison, do you happen to be an 8, 9, or 1?
I am a 6 and very newly discovered. Thanks so
Very
much.
newly
So
discovered.
she just sent me the link real quick to jump on, but yes, so I'm just figuring, kind of getting into the book, but I did the test and listened to the podcast, and
Good.
it resounded with me. So
Yeah, it did. Good. Well, did you have anything you wanted to add?
not yet.
That's all right. Well, we're glad you're here, and I just wanted to, say hi to you in case you had something to add from the perspective of the 8, 9, or 1. So yay. All right, friends. Well, we'll check back in again next week about 1 or 1:30, maybe 2 o'clock, depending on when our speakers can be here. But we'll be doing the next triad, which is the heart triad. So. But feel free to post in the group. It's very fluid as you're learning things, ask questions. There's a lot of people have studied more than I have and can offer great answers. Harper just offered some really great answers I'd never heard before. So I'm so glad she was here. So, all right, friends, see you later. Have a great day.
Bye.